Jujutsu Kaisen is a series that does not miss when it comes to preparation and setting up each arc to not only increase depth but to also add scale. Through chapter 200 of Jujutsu Kaisen manga, the series is now starting to shift dramatically into a much bigger stage, setting the potential for the Culling games even higher than it was before. We are also now witnessing the most pivotal dilemma the cast has ever come across, with either saving Yuji or Satoru Gojo, one obviously being the main character and the other being arguably the most pivotal part of the story as a whole. Gege Akutami is setting the stage for the second phase of the Culling games to be an even better and grander stage than it was previously, with all these new elements he's adding. But in this video I wanted to discuss all the previous events that have happened so far in this arc leading up to this second phase, because in just 40 chapters Gege managed to fit so much content, giving a lot of our favourite members in this cast some amazing moments and exploring more interesting things relating to their character, abilities and so much more. With Jujutsu Kaisen, there are so many different aspects to the story that you may not have picked up from the first or even second read through, and specifically with the Culling games and the events leading up to it with Yuji's execution and the Zenin massacre. I was reading all of this to the current chapter weekly, and for a series as intricate with its details as JJK is, I decided to go back to the beginning to refresh my memory on the series with a key focus on this current arc. So let's take a look and dissect the first phase of the Culling games, Jujutsu Kaisen's biggest arc yet. The Culling game starts off with clear goals for the group, which is to pretty much gather as much points as possible from the players with the most points at the time, which led to Panda and Hakari going after Kashimo and Megumi and Yuji after Higuruma. We are also aiming to find the angel player who might find a way to free Gojo from the prison realm. The Culling game, similar to Shibuya albeit at a larger scale, is a shift in POVs between each member of the team, as when entering the colony each player is sent to a random location. Right off the bat we start the Culling games with Yuji's POV, and this was a really sick introduction into the games and the different types of sorcerers the main cast is going to come up against. Both Megumi and Yuji are on the hunt for Higuruma, but after encountering a couple low tier players and effortlessly taking them down, Yuji comes across Higuruma first, and in only 6 or so chapters, Gege managed to introduce and showcase a very compelling character and definitely a fan favourite. Higuruma Hiromi is a character that previously worked as a criminal defense lawyer. He is someone who from his origin has always wanted to preserve a fair and equal ruling and a keen sense of justice for all parties involved. During a short sequence of Higuruma working on a case, he unlocked his curse technique and in turn became a player in this death game. For Higuruma at the time, with all the unjust stuff he went through and witnessed, he changed as a person and took a liking to the fundamentals of the Culling games and the rules at which it's set by. Not only did he take a liking to it, but he became a deadly sorcerer, scoring some of the highest points out of all the players within the colony. He's referred to as a genius, breezing through all his studies to become a lawyer with potential to be a judge, and with the introduction of his curse technique, he's stated to be an exceptional sorcerer, hitting the grade 1 level in only 12 days with even a domain expansion, the pinnacle of Jujutsu sorcery as stated by Kenjaku back in Shibuya. I should clarify that even though he does have a domain expansion, it does take less skill if you don't have a short hit attack, but nevertheless it's still a very impressive feat and demonstrates the skill of Higuruma and how he managed to score over 100 points. His domain basically inserts you into a trial where both parties can't attack, and depending on how you answer a set of questions, your curse technique, or in Yuji's case since you don't have one, your curse energy gets taken away. The real fight starts at this point and Gege does what he always does, giving us a cool fight with some nice paneling and dynamic movement. This fight was one of the best in both the Culling games and JJK as a whole, not necessarily because of the actual fight itself, but really the characterization of Higuruma and especially Yuji. Gege throws a complete curveball at us when Yuji demanded a retrial to survive, which called upon Yuji's actions in Shibuya and the mass murder he committed. Unlike the last trial Higuruma put Yuji through where he was under suspicion of gambling underage, Yuji quickly entered a different mood, with an unwavering look pleading guilty to all of Sukuna's actions that he deemed himself guilty of, showing us that he's still not forgiven himself for all those lives Sukuna took, which surprisingly enough led to a change within Higuruma where he gained a grasp of his usual self and came to his senses. This fight was something special, and I wouldn't think differently if someone placed this as their favourite moment / fight within the arc. Everything from Higuruma's character to the action involved and the conclusion was handled really well, and for all this to take place in such a short time frame makes it all the more impressive. The next battle in this series of events involves Megumi, this time with his battle against Reggie, the first incarnated sorcerer from the past that the group come up against, who previously made a deal with Kenjaku. This is where we kinda get a grasp of what Gege is doing with this half of the arc. We are getting different POVs for everyone involved with gathering points and seeing how they specifically deal with the sorcerers they come up against. Megumi vs Reggie was an interesting fight for many reasons. Firstly, it's very different to what Yuji came up against with Higuruma, and it very much felt like a true sorcerer battle. There were multiple back and forths where each side of the battle had a counter to what was thrown at them and had to act accordingly. Secondly, it was a very good showcase of how Megumi has grown as a sorcerer in just 12 days since the conclusion of Shibuya. He completely switched, gaining a whole new perspective where unlike Yuji, he would do absolutely anything, even killing, to fulfill his objectives. He utilizes his Shikigami a lot better and grasps a better understanding of how to utilize his techniques in certain scenarios. Reggie's ability allows him to recreate contracts made from receipts that spawn in items that can help his physical state or his surroundings, like when he repaired his recent damage through resting a couple days at a spa, and when he dropped an entire house in Megumi's domain to forcibly crush him from his own technique. It was very clear that Megumi was going against an incredibly strong opponent for him, and there was barely any room for mistakes. A misstep in a plan could cause either side to face some serious consequences, which made every step crucial and forced each of them to counter effectively, otherwise it's game over. And Megumi does exactly that, by luring Reggie into a gymnasium so he can trap him with his domain, then effectively uses 10 Shadows technique to take him down whilst also keeping his strongest Shikigami Divine Dog as a trump card and finishing blow. A true sorcerer battle that Megumi came out on top in. Reggie was not as compelling nor intriguing as Higuruma, but this fight with all its twists and excitement made every situation enticing and an overall great read. It wasn't too long, just like Yuji's POV, and it portrayed some very interesting qualities with Megumi and his abilities. The domain being incomplete managed to work in Megumi's favour, as the domain only worked to amplify Megumi's curse technique to 120%, which completely caught Reggie off guard. Only Gege can make a domain being incomplete a benefit to the user. The fight could have easily swayed in Reggie's favour, but Megumi just slightly took the victory. He definitely didn't leave unscathed though, which led to the Angel player finding him and meeting up with Yuji, which we get to see 30 chapters later. Yuta Okotsu, the one and only man to have the highest curse energy reserves, even surpassing that of Satoru Gojo, the one classed as a pure prodigy. Yuta Okotsu entered the Sendai colony, which even from its introduction is portrayed to be the most dangerous colony in terms of its players. One player has 2 self-sufficient Shikigami that are this damn big, another is stated to have the highest curse energy output out of all the players in the games, and another can control the sky. Compared to what Yuji and Megumi were up against with Higuruma and Reggie, this colony has ridiculously more powerful players involved, and it was a perfect place for Yuta Okotsu to begin the games with his intent to not only score 400 points by himself, but to also kill Kenjaku. Literally no one in the colony, aside from the civilians that Yuta was escorting out, was under a special grade curse or sorcerer. Aside from Miwa of course, but we can just ignore her. And with all these great powers came a great battle, where after Yuta defeated a cursed spirit capable of slicing his life away, he moves on to fight the man with the highest curse energy output, and Uro, the person who can control the sky, in a 3-way deadlock, which was honestly more like a 2v1. Gege really wanted to show us that Yuta was a monster in this fight, even more so than when he killed Yuji and scared the living shit out of Naoya and Choso. It was the biggest fight in the Culling game so far and my personal favourite. There's just something about Yuta's fighting style that just hits different, and both Uro and especially Ishigori were both good characters in their own right. Yuta, even after using a reverse curse technique to defeat the Clockwork Spirit using positive energy, can still somewhat match up to Uro and Ishigori. Both of these sorcerers are constantly on the attack, and Gege does a really good job of characterizing them both in between this crazy action. We learn more about Uro and her pride as a sorcerer, and with Ishigori, he clearly has a desire to fight a strong opponent that can satisfy his hunger for battle, something very common with past Jujutsu sorcerers and explored perfectly with Ishigori. Some of the most dynamic fight sequences the manga has to offer are in this fight. Not only Yuta, but everyone inside the colony is a monster, and for more than half of the battle, Yuta wasn't even using Rika and was just purely running on cursed energy output. So when Yuta realized he wasn't going to take the lead in this deadlock without his main powers, he summoned Rika, and this of course shifted the fight dramatically. Rika not only possesses Yuta's insane cursed energy reserves, but can also work as a second combatant, capable of taking on Ishigori's attacks and fighting back. Everyone then takes the fight into its endgame with the triple domain expansion release. From reading this weekly, I legit couldn't wait for the next chapter to drop, but when it did, I had a bitter taste seeing that damn cockroach ruin the domain. It left me in a certain type of mood, but whilst everyone was shocked at what just happened, Yuta managed to capitalize on the situation and slam Uro, who then got defeated by Ryu and the cockroach right after, taking us into the conclusion of this insane battle. The conclusion was probably one of the better parts of this battle, seeing Yuta accept Ishiguro's request to settle the battle with a large output of cursed energy, followed by Yuta using his copy ability to launch his attack against him, was just heat. Amazing quality with one of my favourite fights in the manga as a whole. Kingji Hakari vs Kashimo is a pretty controversial fight within the series. I remember when reading this weekly, a lot of people weren't a fan of Hakari and his abilities. They weren't feeling the whole domain spam from Hakari with his seemingly never-ending luck, but honestly I felt that it suited his character pretty perfectly, and made me like not only him but Kashimo a lot more. Hakari's entire luck / plot armor part of his character is rooted from his introduction into the story back in the Fight Club, then later explored through his fight against Charles, then of course with Kashimo, where it says that Hakari uses skill to grab a hold of this near impossible luck. He carefully plans his actions in order to have the edge in battle, and this was very clear through multiple occasions within his fight against Kashimo. He literally starts the battle with a jackpot to guarantee him that initial safety and advantage, which he definitely needed against a fighter like Kashimo, who in most regards is just superior to Hakari. They are both complete monsters in their own right, and this is especially the case for Kashimo, who instead of waiting for Hakari's jackpot to end in order to not be at a clear disadvantage, he still keeps on with the charge, tanking Hakari's attacks whilst also finding openings within his reverse curse technique by using toxins and attacking him with brute force to the head. This was all done without the use of a curse technique, just pure curse energy manipulation and skill from Kashimo's end, which all made sense with his flashback to when he made a contract with Kenjaku in order to find Sukuna and quench that thirst for a strong opponent. Very good fight and an overall decent segment within the games. Most of the fight was just straight up hands, which is always nice to see. The both of them were using the surroundings a lot to gain an advantage, like when Hakari kicked Kashimo into the water in order to suppress his electricity. Idle Death Gamble being one of the most confusing domains in the manga, but most definitely still cool as hell and complements Hakari's character well. I'm really looking forward to seeing Kashimo's curse technique, and he's got one of the coolest fighting styles that I've seen from the manga so far, so I'm glad Gege didn't kill him off. Very good conclusion to a very tough battle. Next part of the arc is Maki's segment, and in terms of pure development and evolution within the character, this was my favourite within the arc. Everything from Maki's introduction to Naoya coming back as a curse looking like, you know what, I'm not gonna say it, let's move on, was fire and a perfect way to push Maki into realizing her potential and true perspective. Noritoshi is also back to help Maki fight against Naoya, and I'm glad Gege included him within this arc and gave more insight into the current state of the Kamo clan. He's also got a completely new look now and seems to be willing to take the risk of dying in this fight at any point. And Naoya now as a curse is more of a threat than him in the Zenin massacre ever was. Naoya back as a human was capable of posing a minor threat to Maki in the Zenin clan, but now as a curse he can completely body her with a blitz whilst also retaining his projection sorcery and goofy ego. Maki, although described to be a monster who can hop in and out of colonies during her intro, is honestly nothing compared to what she becomes later within this battle in a very unique way, perfect for her state of being a sorcerer with zero cursed energy. Maki from the beginning has never had a teacher or anyone to really rely on in order to gain knowledge on her strange outcast state of having no cursed energy. She was overwhelmed in this fight, but after two incarnated players intervene, she finds a sense of how to fight effectively and becomes someone equal to that of Toji Zenin. This is where we reach these two spreads within the manga, which are both absolutely stunning in their own way. One, when placing all the sumo parts together, creates this sick choreographed sequence, and the other looks like something straight out of Vagabond. A really cool way of evolving Maki in not only strength but also her perspective, finding out what she was missing all along that was hindering her greatly, which then resulted in Maki becoming a true monster, unable to be sensed by domain expansions and possessing a sword similar to Toji's that can damage the soul itself. Gege snapped in this end portion, and the segue into the second part of this arc with Sukuna being the fallen one that the angel wants to defeat was just another massive shock hinting at something crazy soon to come. Just as Megumi says, everything has been going too well, and there's definitely going to be a shift that might not necessarily benefit the gang. Culling games so far, especially on a binge, was really dope, and after this reread I'm even more excited to see what Gege has cooking with all the mystery that hasn't been uncovered yet. Hope you guys enjoyed this dive into the arc, and I did put a lot of effort into this one, so if you enjoyed, make sure to like and sub up if you want to see more JJK related content from me and any manga stuff in general. Thank you all, and I hope you have a blessed rest of your day. Peace.